Welcome back to the Business Book Challenge by the Coaching Network. I'm Maria Medina, your networking and business coach. And today we're going to be analyzing a classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Now, the book can be broken down into 4 sections, which are how to communicate with people, how to get them to like you, how to get them into your way of thinking, and then how to lead them. So that's how I'm going to be discussing it with you guys today. And then we're going to go through some practical applications on how to do that with a special guest, Sara Singer with the Law Offices of Sara Singer. She's going to talk to you a little bit about communication, getting your point through, seeing the point from other people, and how to work on those negotiation skills as well. I'm going to be using a phrase, a quote that I actually like using for a lot of my teachings, which is people like doing business with people they know, like, trust, and value. In order for people to get to know you and like you, one of the things that you have to do is actually get to know them. This is part of the communication process when you're trying to win friends and influence people. You need to know where people are coming from. And in order to do this, you need to participate in active listening. You need to see where they're coming from, what their opinion is based on. Are they making any assumptions? And the only way for you to really truly do this is to ask questions and really attentively listen to what they're saying. Understanding where the other person is coming from is key in any negotiation, as well if you're trying to influence them into your way of thinking. The reason why it's key is because you need to know where they're coming from, and you need to know where your way of thinking is going to bring them value. They need to be able to value what it is that they're going to end up doing through your way of thinking if you're trying to persuade them in a certain way. But you also need to understand where they're coming from. What are their motivators? What are they influenced by? And you need to do this by getting to know them better. The only way to do this is by listening and asking questions, like the book exactly says. As I was reading the book, one of the things that kept popping up in my head was that value proposition. You want to make sure that you're bringing value to the conversation, but that the person is also feeling listened to. You don't want to convince, you want to influence. You want to make sure that you're bringing them around to your way of thinking through communication. And like we spoke for the previous book, you also want to create that win-win scenario. You need to understand where they're coming from so that you can build that for them and build that emphasis on how they're going to benefit. You're going to benefit. It's going to be for the benefit of all of them. How are you getting people to like you? There's nothing more that people like than being listened to, being heard. And if you engage with genuine interest and you're not just doing it to make sure that you get your way, you're actually interested in learning where they're coming from and they feel heard, that is something that's going to help you in that likability part of the equation, and also ultimately help you determine what the value proposition is going to be. Because if you don't understand where somebody is coming from, you're not going to be able to give them the value that they want to get out of this conversation, out of this relationship, out of this exchange. That listening portion really speaks to all parts of that quote that I said, where people like doing business with people they know, like, trust, and value. They need to get to know you. They need to get to trust you, value what you are offering to them, and they need to get to like you. One of the things that was actually brought up during the book was the power of a name, the power of remembering somebody's name and using that during conversation while you're trying to get them into your way of thinking. I always encourage you to, when you are having conversations out in networking, in business relations, or whatever it may be, continue to practice that person's name as you meet them. I have the habit of when I shake somebody's hand, I say, "Nice to meet you, Eric," as they say, as they introduce themselves, so that it cements their name in my mind and I'm more likely to remember it when I have an interaction with Eric later. The other thing that you're able to do as well is, as you're having conversations and as you're learning more about the other person, you can start doing or taking mental notes in the form of, Eric likes to do this, or Eric told me about this experience he had. That way you start linking his name with the information that is being fed to you, and you're able to then relate that back to him, and you can use his name in a powerful way. When was the last time that somebody called your name in a crowded room and you turned automatically because you heard it? Names are powerful, and when you're using it in a conversation to grab their attention to certain points, it can really drive their attention to what it is that you're trying to say. Something else that can really add to that likability portion of the equation is remembering other people's likes and stories and bringing them up in separate occasions. It really shows that you are paying attention to what they were trying to share with you and you genuinely care about what they have to say. Another part is remembering their accomplishments, or actually paying attention to their accomplishments and praising them for it. Reaching out of the blue to somebody that you're trying to connect with based on an accomplishment that they just had. I use LinkedIn all the time to reach out to my connections, make sure that I congratulate them on work anniversaries, on their birthdays, whether they're transitioning into a new job. If they're sharing stuff about a project that they're really excited about and I have something to say about it, I make sure that I read the post and I engage with genuine interest. That's very important when you're communicating with somebody and when you're engaging with somebody, whether it's in social media or in person. We try and stay away from fake pleasantries. We want to talk to them with genuine interest, and that's where curiosity plays a big part. Coming from a coaching background where it is all based on asking questions that help other people share what it is that they want to accomplish, curiosity is key. Wanting to know where the other person is coming from in order to be able to apply that influence is really going to help you in this journey of winning friends and influencing people. The more you do this, the easier it will become to do, as Dale Carnegie said, get them to say yes, yes faster. Get them to agree where you're coming from because you're speaking their language. Something else that can come from this curiosity and asking these questions is making them think that the idea is actually theirs because it's to their benefit. So when you're asking these questions and you're leading them in a way, it's trying to get them to agree to something that they actually came up with, that they actually brought up. Somebody is going to more likely stick to, and this comes from coaching too. If somebody says it, they're more likely to listen to what they say than what you say to them. They're more likely to believe in their beliefs, in their ideas, than something that is imposed on them. As you're getting to know them, make sure that you don't forget the first part of the equation, which is also allow them to get to know you. Express what you're feeling as it becomes relevant to what they're saying. And if possible, do it in a storytelling way. People like listening to stories more than I statements. If you're telling it in a story and they're able to use their imagination to visualize it, to see it happening, they're more likely to be able to see themselves doing something to that part. They're going to be able to visualize it better if you're doing it in a storytelling way than in a I believe that this is what we should do or what you should do. All of these principles can really be applied to a leadership perspective if you're leading a team, and they can really help you understand your team better so that you can help them perform to their highest ability. If you're understanding where somebody is coming from, what motivates them, you're more likely to be able to give them the work, give them the empowerment that they need to do their jobs better. It'll also help with those difficult conversations because nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. And leaders aren't perfect. So what you want to do is you want to engage in conversation on a regular basis so that it becomes natural to share when things happen, whether they're good or they're bad. And you're sharing, and this, I like to share this with my clients, and I like to say, you want to make sure that you're sharing from a point of no judgment, a no judgment zone. Whatever you say or they say back, you're not judging it from any criteria. You're trying to figure out what's going to be best for you, for the company, for the team. If they know that they're able to share their mistakes or something that was missed with you openly so that you can then discuss how to fix it and how to go forward, they're more likely to come to you for that. They're more likely to come to tell you and seek that advice so that you can then lead them in the right direction. One good thing to do this with any interaction, whether it's with clients or employees, is to ask what they think after you've come up with a plan. What are their thoughts on what we're doing and what we're going forward? Because it'll help you understand if they have any reservations, if you need to ask further questions, and it also makes them feel a little bit more involved in the decision-making process. The main principle of this book is clear communication through understanding the other person. You need to adapt yourself with how you're conducting yourself, how you're speaking, what you're saying based on the other person's perspective. You need to learn to understand them by listening and asking key questions so that you know what motivates them, what's getting them there, what they need to hear from you so that you can win them over, eventually influence or lead them in a way that you need them to go. This is exactly what we were talking about last week in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where you want to seek first to understand and then be understood. Use clear communication and curiosity to help you build stronger relationships, whether it's with your clients, with your team, you as a leader, with your employees. Ask questions, be curious, go out there and make sure that you're engaging in meaningful conversations, learning from other people so that you can learn what motivates them and you can adjust yourself accordingly to what it is that you have to say. Now that we have learned a little bit more about how to win friends and influence people, I wanted to bring in a guest that could help us a little bit with those difficult conversations, those negotiation skills, and how to get information out of people. And what better person to do that than my very close friend, Sara Singer, family law attorney. Hi, Sara.
Hi.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in your business.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Sara Singer. I am a family law attorney. My firm is the Law Offices of Sara Singer. We are located in Fort Lauderdale, and we practice exclusively family law. So we do divorces, child custody issues, time sharing, alimony, child support, enforcement actions, modifications, prenups, postnups, the most just romantic things happening in my office 24/7. I do practice mostly in Broward and Palm Beach and Dade County, but occasionally I'll take some cases out of that Tri-County area.
Awesome. And as you said, I'm sure you're having the most wonderful conversations that everybody wants to talk about with everybody you talk to every day.
I mean, it's juicy. It's definitely juicy.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time for being here with us today. And let's get down to it. I know that when you're having conversations with your clients, it's often hard to bring up hard topics with them, and they may not want to disclose a lot of information because it's quite private, it's quite personal. Maybe it puts them in a bad light. And part of what we learned from the book was actually how to get information out of people so that you can help them and you can really talk to them at their level. So how do you get information out of your clients that they may not necessarily want to share?
So it's a little bit easier getting information from my own clients because they're hiring me to do a job. And I always tell them, I cannot do the best job for you unless I know all of the facts. So usually what I'll do is I'll have, a scenario where I'll educate my client, right? Like I want to tell them everything about the scenario that they're going through so that they understand why it's important for me to know all of their dirties. I always say at the end, look, tell me your dirties. It's a lot easier for me to make your shit smell better if I know about it in advance. I never want to hear from the other side something that my client did or may have done. I want to know from my clients just that for them to tell me right away, like what are the dirties? What are the things that are not pretty that I need to know about? And I think I just explain the scenario to them first so that they understand why it's important that I know everything.
I love that. And I think that also speaks to the fact that you're coming from like, this is a no judgment zone. You need to tell me everything so I can help you to the best of my abilities and you need all the information possible to be able to do that. So for being on there, to be able to tell them the scenario that you believe that they're going through, how do you put yourself in their feet? How do you come to understand where they're coming from?
That's really difficult to do because as a divorce attorney, I can't say to somebody, "Oh, I know what you're going through," because every scenario is a little bit different. Everything that you're going through as a family member going through a divorce is completely different. It's not the same as investing in a stock portfolio, which is the same for everybody, right? It's completely different when you're talking about a personal life experience that somebody is going through. So when I am doing my initial consultation, because it usually is all about forming the initial bond with my clients, and then they sort of feel more comfortable with me to just unload and tell me everything. And I really do a lot of listening to them, to hear them out, to answer their questions, even if I'm giving them an answer that they may not like. They need to be able to trust that I am going to tell them whether it's good or bad, and if it's bad, how we're gonna portray it so that it's not as bad, which kind of goes back to I can make your shit smell better if I know about it. So instead of saying, I understand what you're going through, I try to explain it to them in the scenario of a courtroom. Because when you're presenting your case to a judge, your judge doesn't know what you're going through as a litigant. So I have to really frame it to the client as, okay, you're presenting your case to a judge. What are the big picture items that the judge needs to know so that they can understand, maybe not because they've experienced it, but they can understand it and understand where you're coming from. And when I put it in that perspective, the client opens up and shares with me, what I need to know, and they generally feel comfortable sharing it with me.
It sounds a little bit like you're coaching them with a bit of a translator. This is what you're saying, and this is what you're experiencing, but this is how we have to frame it, and this is how we have to frame it to the other side, to the judge, to opposing counsel, so that they understand you. So it's a lot about teaching them how to communicate effectively.
Exactly. And sometimes that's hard because something that a client might think is the most important aspect of their case really has zero bearing in front of a judge. So that's a tough pill to swallow, to have to understand that what you might think is the most important thing in your case really has no bearing. And like in Florida, a really good example of that is cheating. In a divorce case, whether you've cheated with one person or you've slept with the entire county, it really doesn't have an effect on your actual divorce case. But obviously, if you've been cheated on, that's something that's so important to you. You want to express that to anybody who will listen. So it's really difficult. It's a tough scenario to be able to tell somebody like, look, I get it that really was hard and difficult and hurtful, and I'm sure what you're experiencing is awful, but we have to communicate this effectively, your entire divorce case effectively, to the judge. And if we spend all of the time on this cheating thing, it's going to use up time that we should be using to show how much an asset is worth, so that at the end of the day, you walk out with enough money to support yourself.
Great. And I think that also speaks to teaching them about a little bit about communication, and with your point on cheating and the other spouse doing things. How do you teach them? Because obviously between them hiring you, getting to court and dealing with everything, there's a lot of space in between where they're still potentially speaking, and especially if children are involved, with their ex or soon to be ex spouse. So how do you teach them to deal when the ex spouse is being difficult or they're throwing things at them? How do they communicate with them effectively so it doesn't essentially ruin their case?
High conflict co-parenting is one of the things that we deal with the most, right? Like that's like just a pinnacle of divorce law with kids. And so, an example will be one parent says to the other parent a message, I hope you show up on time to pick up Susie from school. You're always drunk at 3 p.m. And when I represent the other side who's receiving that message, I tell them to respond with just the facts, right? And the facts are, I will pick Susie up at 3 p.m. She will be safe as always. And you don't necessarily need to dive into the whole like, that's BS, I'm never drunk, you're out of your mind, because although that may be what you want to say, it serves no purpose. And it just shows eventually if that message chain is presented in front of the judge, it makes the person making the allegations look, like the trouble starter. When you're responding in a completely bland and just factual basis, the person that's coming at you with all of these baloney, allegations is the one who looks like the difficult co-parent. And sometimes, and most of the time, they are.
Excellent. And this is actually speaking a lot to what we spoke about last week in our other book, which was seek first to understand before you're seeking to be understood. And you want to make sure that you're communicating with your client, hey, I understand where you're coming from, but let's see it from this side. This is how it needs to be presented so that it goes the best way for you. Thank you, Sara, so much for making the time today. In the interest of anybody that would like to be connected with you, what is the best way for them to reach out, whether it's for family law or just to learn a little bit about what you do?
Probably check out my website. It's www.sarasingerlaw.com. No H's in Sarah. And you can also check me out on TikTok. I, oddly enough, have a pretty large TikTok following. It's at Florida Divorce Lawyer. I post videos all the time about high conflict co-parenting, about how divorces work. It's all Florida specific. So if you're in Florida, that's a good place to find some resources.
Awesome. And today I actually got told a lawyer joke that I'm going to end with, so I hope you like it. And the question is, why do you bury an attorney 10 feet instead of 6 feet under?
Why?
Because deep down, they are really good people.
You're so funny.
Thank you, everybody. I hope if you don't come back for the joke next week, you come back for another book review. And thanks again to our guest, Sara Singer.